Guys, today we are starting a leg sleeve. I'm stoked about this. So it's great to start a leg sleeve because you have this big project, you do this big design. I love that. The only downside is it takes a while. So it'll be the first session. We're doing a back-to-back. We're gonna start today and work into tomorrow. In my opinion, the best way to start attacking sleeves is to be doing multiple sessions. So the request from the client was that he wanted a Roman style sleeve. He didn't want to focus too much on animals. So a lot of the focus is going to, battles, the warriors, Colosseum aspect, and also the mythology or the gods during that time period. So let's take a look at the design. So this is the design we're working with today. I designed the outer half of the leg. Let's talk about it a little bit. So you can see I got this nice warrior down here coming into a silhouette and kind of our transition area around the knee, up into this big godlike Zeus figure. Really, what I'm paying attention to is that there is some size changing. So we have kind of like a medium face here, small guy here, and then huge here. So I like that it changes, right? We're also gonna look at the flow. For this, I chose flow points going down diagonal of the leg, and this is established by the light, by the lightning, electricity, these things here, right? Lastly, I kind of like to tell a story with these things. So just basic, nothing crazy, but we kind of have, our warrior here close up. Then it goes into, him in the Colosseum, and then the god on the top. So to me, this kind of makes sense, right? People would go in there, kind of fight for their lives, be praying to the gods, whatever. You look at it, it could tell you a different story, but I didn't want to pick just random images and throw it in there. So I'm very excited about this. We're going to be starting on the bottom with our guy here. Something I'm going to be focusing on with you guys is high contrast, especially in the statue, male figure faces, with the lightning. I want high contrast stuff. You can see that I did this by kind of blacking out the face here, and having the light come from there. The body is very high contrast, lots of blacks. This is gonna make the tattoo hold up amazing over time, and we see that continued. We move up, we have, our dark figure here, light background, surrounded by electricity. And then at the top, the face is just cut in half, right? Dark and then light. So we're gonna be focusing on that high contrast. I'm gonna be walking you guys through the tattoo and how I apply this. All right, we are gonna be laying the stencil for the first section of the leg sleeve. So I'm gonna try to be taking up this area, and I want it to wrap, right? I want it to be coming to like the center of the shin, and same thing on the back, because if it's too tight, it's gonna leave weird kind of skinny pieces in the center. So since I'm designing the entire outside, and then I'll do the same with the inside, I want the pieces to meet, right? So we want some wrap going on, but we also want to make sure that the wrap does not distort the image. So this is our image for this size of the leg. It's pretty big. So this is going to be going here. What I'm paying attention to is the face, right? So if I get a little bit of warp, I don't mind it on this cloak and shoulder in the back. I'm going to try to keep the wrap away from the face. So I had him stand up, I marked the center points. We're going to do this. My center point is right here on the nose. So it's always good, I always draw a little bit of excess here, so now we're just going to trim the fat. You can see like where I'm marked. So just around this center point is where I'm going to be like cutting it off. So that way the inner side can meet this area, right? And then face me, please. And we're going to do the same thing on the front here. We have this, kind of like our center line. Squiggle that. So I'll bring this out to here, and then a lot of this will just be background, and then turn for me a little bit. That way it like emphasizes the face. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. This looks good. It doesn't look warped. It's right down, our center, which is what I wanted. So we're gonna let this dry. I'm probably just gonna draw a little bit to clean up the ankle, and then we'll get into it. All right, so let's talk about how we're gonna start this thing. This is like the armor right here. You can see in the reference that it's pretty simple here, little texture points. I'm gonna do the stenciled area first, and then I'm gonna fade everything down. So it's gonna be like sharp and detailed here, and then as it moves down to kind of this contour line that I drew, we're just gonna fade it out. So I'm gonna get all this in, leave this after, fade down to this area, and we'll get a nice cuff on this. Right over here, just kind of keeping it light. I'm gonna keep it kind of loose, and once I get everything in, I might be a little bit more intentional. Just some key components to the structure of the piece. You know, especially like where the black or the dark shadow, or if there's like a certain shadow that creates a texture. So I'll do that first. I'll get in everything that I stenciled, and then the in-between, I'll kind of make it up, do it by eye. Sometimes that's the fun stuff. I got my base in here. I had my couple shades that I marked out, and now I'm just pulling it down. So up in here, there's like a lot of texture points, which I'll do like a little bit. The 3RL kind of adds some texture already, but if you want to be a little bit more intentional with that. And then as we get down to the fade, like I'm really just not going to do as much texture. It's going to be like more of a smooth look. So just to show like some difference of when like the fade out starts, I'll put these little like weather points in on the armor. It's kind of like some color distortion. And then you can see, I just kind of put my shades in there from the stencil, and I just did this. So just kind of going over everything, and just bring it right down to kind of that area that I had marked. I just have a slight up curve in the center just to kind of go around that bone. If you look at the reference, the body compared to the background is darker, like over here on the right. So we want to keep that in mind. Right here we're working on the background now, and it's going to be a dark background, which I like, because what that'll do is it will make it very obvious where the body stops. So it's almost like making a line on the outside. We are not going to line it out, but we are going to shade it in darker. I'm just kind of picking and flicking, and it's going to act as a line. Just have a nice cutoff point. So I'll make this side nice and dark. I'm going to leave this a little bit tight, the background. The reason I'm leaving it tight is I don't want to get in the way of things we're doing in the future. So all this will be pretty tight background. So that way when we do the other side, we have some wiggle room. So I'm not getting in the way. And this is that dark background that I was talking about. We are just going over and over until it creates that nice sharp shadow on the outside of the body. Getting a little messy here. I like to kind of fade it out as I'm doing, even when it is a dark background rather than like solid black. I think it just looks a little nicer with the fade. So it's like kind of the chest plate. It's almost like mimicking some abs there with the shadows. You can see a nice background here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the dark background, and as it gets closer to the foot, I'm just going to let it lighten out. I personally just kind of like when things fade out. I don't like the hard cuts. And then I'll probably cross it into our other shade. The reference kind of looks like a little like arm or something sticking out the side. And as I blur the background of the arm, the image, it kind of just creates this effect of the whole thing fading out. which I like, you know. So up here, it's nice, clear background. It's clean. We know it's a background. Maybe some dark. But then as we get lower into our fade out area, we're gonna cross that border and start coming in. And then I'll take a 50% and I'll just kind of go over the whole thing. So now I got this chest plate. So you can see in the reference, the bottom of it's really dark and then it has like a negative space on the outside. And that breaks up the background with the foreground. So like all here is pretty much going to be like negative, and then the background is going to be dark. So it's going to be really nice contrast. It's going to be so obvious where the chest ends. So from the center of the chest, you know, we'll flick out. It'll be dark. And as we get closer to the background, the armor is going to lighten. Just to make sure we get that high contrast look. So what I'm going to be doing is just shading everything as I normally would. I tend to shade a little bit dark anyway, but then we're going to go back with a mag and we're like really going to make the darks dark and the lights pop. And as I keep picking from these like corners, it's just going to make that darker and darker. Coming to the end of day one on this first session. Right now I'm just working on the folds. You know, cape coming this way. We got some of the armor done down here. Now I still need to kind of brush over this with a mag, but we have our structure in and a lot of our shadows. So I'm going to come back to that. Right here on these folds, all I'm trying to do is separate them with black. So in the reference, you can see each fold creates a pretty hefty drop shadow. You know, so that's going to be here, here, up in here. So that's what I was doing first, is just kind of identifying those and building them up. Now with these folds, they're rounded, you know. So once I've identified my shadows, that is like a safe place for me to fade from. So what I mean is, you know, black, black, right? So this is actually a fold. So I'm going to be picking and flicking from my black areas to then create these fades. So that was up, this is flicking down. And the reason I get my blacks in first is that way I can kind of like dig in the black and flick out to create the fade. And it doesn't matter that I'm picking in that area because it's already black. So now I'm just kind of finishing the values on these. Darkening up my shapes. At first I just went in and kind of like one pass my shape of my shape. And now I'm just bumping them up to their true value. And what I've done with this is pretty much everything except the head. So I've like framed out the head today. You can see, right? So I got all the body down. And then tomorrow we'll be working on the head there. So today is day 2. Yesterday we got as much done as we could to make sure we could get it accomplished today, which I think we'll easily be able to do. Like I said earlier when we started, we're going to be focusing on contrast. I love the high contrast, especially with anything like statue related, which you find a lot in the Roman style pieces. So we're going to be focusing on contrast. We talked a little bit about flow, that's figured out. The stencil is already on there. We're going to get them unwrapped. So it's a back-to-back, like you guys have seen me do before. I use the pad system, so I put the pad on top of the stencil to soak up any liquids or ink that could potentially mess it up. Wrap it in saran wrap. So you're gonna see me uncover that and we're gonna see how the stencil held up. So the stencil held up perfect. Really happy about that. All right, let's talk a little bit about this game plan. We're talking about high contrast, right? So what I'm gonna be doing is blacking out like the entire face, like all this inner area. On top of that, you can see in the reference, out of the eyes, I have these like kind of white smoke things kind of coming. So up against the black, that's gonna look really cool. You can see these like circles I made. That's just to tell me how far to bring out my glow. So like this will be black, this will be gray, and then that'll be light gray, and then the white. So it'll have kind of a glow effect. Now I've talked about this before. I think just doing all solid black is a little lazy. So you can see that I have just these little marks down here. This is just his chin and lip. I'll have those in, they'll be like a dark gray, but it'll really look like this shadow over these very mild facial features. Just to add like a little something in there so it's not solid black. Now, if this is solid black, I don't want to make my mask or helmet too dark. So I'll probably keep my heavy shadows. Like I have these heavy drop shadows here. So those will remain black. And then, you know, I have some detailing shadows in the contour of the face part of the mask. But as far as this stuff, I'll probably keep it lighter, especially as it gets like closer to the solid black. You know, like this area, this. And then we have the white coming up. So anything that's kind of close, like in this area on the helmet, I'll probably keep lighter, almost like it's glowing on the helmet. Those aren't necessary, but I think it's really cool when people factor in light sources like that. Like obviously these eyes were a light source that I added to the piece. So if you can, you know, go with that addition, like, okay, this is glowing, let's make it glow a little bit on the helmet. I'm always impressed when I see artists do that, when they factor in the light source. And then as we get farther, like in the back here, there's some like hair from this mohawk thing. That will probably be solid black. So everything away will be really dark. As we get closer in the mask, it'll be light, and then the face will be solid dark, and we'll achieve that high contrast. I just put a bunch of pink dots all over him. Hopefully that made sense to you. It definitely made sense to me. Let's get into it. So the skin is always kind of more tough and resilient the second day. You know, it's a little swollen from working on it the previous day. So to counteract that, I'm probably gonna stay away from my bug pin needles. Probably just use standard needles, and I'll turn my machines up a little bit. So yesterday I think I was working at like 4.7 most of the day. Probably be more in the 5 range. Just to penetrate through the swelling a little bit better. Also, I'll have like a small mag out, like a 7, just to help make things black in the solid black areas. We want to make sure we get nice solid black, especially for trying to achieve a high contrast look. So if the skin is fighting me a little bit today, a small mag will easily penetrate and make that dark. So that will be our needle selection for today, and I'm gonna put out a 5 liner as well, just to help for that in case the 3 is taking too long with the skin. So I'm just getting this background here on the side, keeping it pretty light because we're gonna go so high with our contrast on the mask. So I want the attention to stay on the mask. I'm just kind of doing these like broken lights or blurred, you know, light background. So you saw I just had like the green in there. Really all I'm doing is I am circle shading around the marked areas. The key to this is to not show directional pattern. And I'm being very loose with where it ends, right? So one I might do like right up to the line, and then the next one I'll do just a little over the line. You have to be patient with these. If you go too hard, you're gonna start to create definition, which is like the exact thing we do not want in the background. But you can be patient and just kind of lightly shade the different areas. Kind of going in and out of places. You can get this really faded look. So like I have a light point here, a light point there. So like here would be a little darker. You know, I'm just darkening up the areas that are farther away from our designated light points. And start to get some like broken light action there. So now we're going to be moving more into the mask and mapping out our dark areas of the mask. So we're building up this dude's fresh mohawk right now. I am taking the time to build the strands. So I'm using my liner to just shade in the direction that the hairs would go. And you really get this effect by leaving the negative space in between. So I'll build up some strands, you know, by just kind of swinging the liner up and down like this. You guys have seen me do this before with hair. And then just to build the contrast and the value, I'll go over all the strands that I just kind of created here. You can also do that with a mag. I'm just kind of starting at the top, going back and forth, leaving some little negative space in between these. Some are a little longer, some are shorter. Start with that kind of shows me where the shape ends. And then make them a little bolder. And then I can flick down to kind of elongate those shadows. Now the top, you can see in the reference, the hair like becomes negative space. So now I'm just going to shade over the whole area. And this is going to highlight the top area. Right, you can see that building now. If we put a light shade on the top, just to show that it's not skin tone there. We'll be building a piece on top of this in the future, so I'm just going to keep that light to not get in the way. But to show you the top highlight, then we'll come back in. And I want to have some variations with the hair, so like this one will be nice and long. Next one will be a little shorter. It's going to go long again. Now I'm not going for exactly like the reference, but close. I'm going to pull out the mag just to show you can do this with the mag too. Just hold it on its side. Creates the same effect. If I do it with a mag, I like to hang the needle a lot so I can see the actual needles, right? And then we're just kind of pulling down. So you can get like pretty fine lines with the mag on its side. And then the hair itself is like pretty much a dark shadow, gray. So I'm just going to use my mag to go over all of it. Maybe I'll leave a couple strands there negative. So this will let us like create it dark, build the value, but still keep the texture in there. And then the darkest part is kind of this part that meets the negative space at the top here. So I'm going to be going over all that with the mag here. You can do this with the liner as well. I'm just switching between the needles. And you just start to see this texture really build. Just be patient with it and have something to rush. That's how I like to do it. You know, you get the texture in and then build the value on top. So I've gone through the whole tattoo and now I'm kind of taking a step back and getting a look at it. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure anything that's near the helmet is not negative, like we're just kind of making the skin tone disappear where it gets close to the helmet, and this is going to bring it forward. You can kind of even see just from me doing that. So this is part of like the final touches. So I'm exaggerating the highlights. And now I'm going to put the highlights in. Cool. So I'm really going to focus the lights on this outside. The picture has a lot of highlights. I'm not gonna do all of them. I'm just really gonna do the ones that are important to the right side, because that's like really where I want to show off the light. Now it's a big piece, so it's okay if I have some big highlights. So I always trying to make sure that the pieces look good even without white. The white is just like a bonus for me. So even if this white does not heal well, I still want the tattoo to look good. So right now I'm happy with the piece even without the white. So the white is really just for fun. If it holds, we get an extra layer. If not, it's fine because the piece was not relying on the white. I'm gonna dot this cloak here, kind of represent like the threads in the light. Not a smooth texture. And there's a pretty heavy one on the outside of the helmet here, so we're just gonna take our time and get it pretty solid. And you can see I have so much black in this piece that like where I'm putting the whites in, it's really standing out, and that's because it's by all these dark shadows. And then of course we're gonna do the eyes. Now I'm gonna leave the highlight more to the center of this negative space. Like I'm not going to completely pack it in to the negative space, and that will kind of show like a glow. So it'll go from white to negative space to shade. So creating that like gradient from the white to the negative space to the shade will help produce that glow effect. I'm just using straight white, and I just poured it out. Like I wasn't letting it sit out all day. Sometimes when you do that, the white light kind of chalks up a little bit. If that happens, you can add like a drop of shading solution. That can help. And then even though in the reference, this whole side of the helmet is like pretty much white, I'm not going to do that. But I'll hit some spots in it just to show the effect of a highlight. But just leaving it skin tone, it'll get the job done. It'll look good. My white sessions usually last about 10 minutes. Kind of get in, get out. Some people last longer. I know a couple artists that'll spend, half hour on white. So I'm going to be finishing the other side with the highlights. We will clean this off, get some pictures and videos, and I'll show you guys some final product.